Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's discussion, freshly minted, is a conversation among junior mining CEOs that are new to the role. Today, we're going to discuss how they got to the position, why they're the right people for the job, and what comes next at their respective companies. For a bit of housekeeping first, this event is being recorded and will be available to watch in the coming days on Six.com as well as our YouTube page. And we encourage you to submit questions in the chat on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. We hope to weave them into the conversation if possible, but if not, we'll try to carve out some time at the end to get to them. Please submit them at any time. If you ask them early, we're more likely to be able to get to them during the event. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I'd love to start off with a couple introductions. Just say your name, your company, and what your role was prior to becoming CEO, just to introduce before we get started. I'll shoot it to you, Brian, first.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Brian Penny. I'm the interim CEO of a company called Wallbridge Mining. I was previously with Wallbridge for the last 5 years as the CFO.
Awesome. And Jean-Paul?
Yeah, so I'm Jean-Paul Tsotsos. I'm the interim CEO of Chesapeake Gold. Recently minted just earlier this month. And I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences and my knowledge with the audience today.
Thanks, JP. And finally, Barry.
Thanks for having us, Romeo. Yeah, I'm Barry O'Shea. I'm the interim CEO of Highland Copper. I spent the last 18 months in the CFO role, also dealing with the business development side of our company, and I've just stepped into the interim CEO role.
Thanks. And also starting back again right at Barry, I'd love to just get a sense of your formal education and first few years in the industry, how you got started.
Yeah, of course. So, I'm an accountant by trade, naturally in the finance area. But I think importantly, and this goes for anybody in the finance section, you have to see yourself across industry and across all other areas of the business. So really, I spent my whole career in industry. At the outset, actually, I wasn't initially in mining. I was working in industrial manufacturing for Lincoln Electric, one of the larger industrial manufacturers based out of the US, making welding machines. Just an incredible basing in industrial manufacturing. I spent time in Canada, in Holland, and in the UK working for them. And then after that, mid-career, I stepped into mining. And my first role there was with New Gold, interestingly, alongside Brian Penny. And a fantastic opportunity to work at a growing business, helping grow New Gold into an intermediate gold producer, and really seeing all aspects of the business, the goods and the bads, through up and down cycles, and good and bad from a mine construction perspective as well. So you get to see all sides of it.
No, that makes sense. And because connection to Brian, I'll shoot it to you. What was your formal education, and really how'd you get involved in mining?
Thank you. I was born, educated, and raised in Sudbury. I went to college in Sudbury, and after that, I pursued my CMA designation. With the merger of the accounting bodies in Canada, I'm a CPA. My first job in the mining industry was at a small gold mine in northwestern Ontario. It was called the Renabi Gold Mine. Believe it or not, it was one of Barrick's first mines in their portfolio. After that, I moved to Timmins, took on the role as a mine controller. I was asked to relocate to Toronto to help with a year-end, and I've never looked back. My family didn't work in the mining business. We were all working in, secondary jobs associated with mining. And I fell in love with the industry. I've always been in the mining industry, except for a few years when I worked for Dundee Bancorp, which I believe today is known as Dundee Capital. So learned a lot. I've been, working at mine sites as well as corporate, so I have a good knowledge of how everything fits together. And I love this industry. It's a great industry. Made a lot of friends in the industry, and had a lot of fun.
I appreciate that. It can be fun at its best. It's certainly a small community. But speaking of JP, I'll shoot it to you for just again your background, formal education, and how you got your start in mining.
Yeah, so I'm actually a geologist originally. I did my undergrad and my master's at the University of Toronto, all focused on economic geology and the exploration for deposits. My first job was a small company with a project in Montana on the Stillwater complex. and we were looking for platinum, palladium, and chromatite horizons. And I had a good team with a good knowledge of how to do exploration and how to do it systematically. And it started the basis of, knowing to be around good people, around good projects. And, I spent my next 4 years at Royal Nickel Corporation. It was such a wonderful experience, a couple holes in the ground when I first got on there. Had the chance to log hundreds of meters of core over for those 4 years. But because it was a small company, I also got exposure to the metallurgical side, working with the metallurgists and putting together a geometallurgical model for the project. It's all about the experiences I find that really help to define the rest of your career. And it's important to get the right experiences at the start and be around the right people. And I was very fortunate to have those two things happen to me early on.
Oh, awesome. And now that we're all acquainted, and looking through the list of people who are attending today's event, we did notice there were a number of what looked like new geologists or geologists kind of in the middle of their career, but also people who seemed kind of new to the industry in a lot of ways. And I'd love to know, and we'll start with you, JP, if you have any tips or insights on what that crowd should do in their career to become a candidate to one day become a CEO of a company in the junior mining space.
Yeah, so that kind of was feeding into that already in my previous preamble. One of the first things I did in university was I spoke to my professors, and I spoke to alumni that were in the industry. And it's very clear that there's a lot of good people out there and a lot of good companies. But then there's a lot of people that are working in our industry too that unfortunately they're in there for different reasons, and you're not going to get the right experience. I got introduced to the people at Beartooth Platinum. That's where I got a chance to work in Montana. And then I also had a chance to interact with a professor that in university who worked for Inco and later Vale, and he was doing project evaluations. And that got me interested on the finance aspects of the business. And it really drove my my later aspirations in my career. And once I had a couple of years under my belt as a geologist, I went back to school and got my MBA, and then moved on to the finance side. So the most important thing I always find is having the right people around you, having a chance to have open dialogue, great mentors, and that will help you to define the path that you need to take in order to get to where your goal is, whether that's CEO, whether that's you want to be a specialist doing mineral reserves and resources, or a CFO. It's great advice for anyone to talk to the people that have already done it and find their pathway, and then find your own pathway there.
I appreciate that. And Barry, I know your past experience jumping from CFO to CEO. Any tips for people kind of down that road of how to become a candidate for CEO?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing that I'd say, in particular when you're junior coming into a company, I wouldn't be focusing on becoming a CEO yet. You have a lot of rungs to climb and a lot of experiences to get. So really what's the most important is that you just immerse yourself in the business. Not obviously you're going to have a functional expertise and a role to play, be it whether you're in finance or geology or so on and so forth. But keep your head up for opportunities outside of your area. And I think of most importance, and Brian mentioned it earlier, spend some time at a mine site. And I'm speaking directly to finance people on that one. If you want to build your credibility, spend your time on the ground, understand the business, and really at the same time, just get some great life experiences. There's some wonderful mining towns out there. I'll look back to the Cobar in New South Wales in Australia, where the Peak Mines is, a place I got to come and go from a fair bit. Just a wonderful place, and every young accountant should have the opportunity to spend some time at a place like that and really learn the mining business.
No, appreciate that. Don't just stick around in Toronto and Vancouver. Actually see where the mining actually happens. I think that's great advice. I'll throw it to you, Brian. Just tips for youth in the industry on how to move up in their career.
Oh, thank you, and an excellent question. Everybody starts their career at a junior role, and you need to be a sponge. You need to immerse yourself. You need to learn. You need to meet people. You need to identify mentors. In my career, my two mentors were Randall Oliphant and John Bruff. I learned so much from them. They helped guide my career. And I applied for my first job in the industry, and I got it through an outplacement counselor. But after that, my career, as I passed my career, I got recommended from people to take on more senior roles. When I was a corporate controller at Dundee Bancorp, I was recommended to be the first CFO of Kinross in 1993 because I was in the right place at the right time, working my guts out. And that is key. Yes, we need to worry about work-life balance, but you need to demonstrate that you're worthy throughout your career and climb the ladder. And I've never looked back after that. One of my best success stories is when I got involved with Western Goldfields with Randall Oliphant and Ray Threckald. The company was about to default on a gold loan, and we got some friends together, raised money to a private placement, took out the loan, raised enough money to complete a feasibility study on the Mesquite mine in California. Got that done, put together an equity financing, project financing, and the Mesquite mine is still operating today, and it's produced more than 2 million ounces in its history. That was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot when I was on the board of Equinox Minerals, the Lumwana mine in Africa. We were an emerging copper producer. I chaired the audit committee and sat on the board. And the whole process of, it ultimately got bought by Barrick, but, we started off with a hostile bid that led to, another company, coming in with a hostile bid for us, and Barrick topped it off. So just going through all those gyrations and listening and learning and developing relationships through, Bay Street investment bankers, lawyers, accountants, etc. It's a lot of fun, but you have to be prepared to immerse yourself, to establish the relationships, and to continue over time.
That makes sense. And I got one question from the audience. Jack asks, and I'll start with you, Brian. I think everybody's kind of touched on this, but we'll try to be explicit as possible in our answers. He asks how you get jobs in more successful mining companies if you don't have that experience. So if you're really fresh out of school, how do you get your first break? I think is what Jack asked. So I'll throw it to you, Brian.
Well, how you get your first break is you have to be relentless. You have to, follow up on things. Far too often people will, go online, file an application, forget about it for 3 months. And by that time, you're at the bottom of the in-basket, so to speak. So, keep in touch, work your network. The power of your network is huge. You may have an uncle who's in the mining business that could introduce you to somebody. Don't be afraid to use all those tools. But don't expect to start off as the vice president of something. You need to pay your dues, work your guts out, and rewards will come to you.
I think that's solid advice. JP and Barry, if you guys have anything to add on first breaks, we can do that before we jump to the next question.
My first break was a really interesting story. My first break was with Beartooth Platinum, and actually my first job for them, they were at the PDAC in Toronto, which happens every March, and they were looking for a young guy to stand at the booth and basically answer questions so that they can go run off and meet other people and do a whole bunch of the work and see talks and that sort. And so I was just in school at the time. I went out there. I spent 3 days with them straight, manning the booth, getting to know them. And on the back of that, they invited me to go work in Montana. Right. So sometimes it takes a little bit of volunteering and getting to know people and spending time with people for a long period of time that opportunities come to you. And then later on in my career, I've always taken the initiative to build my network and meet people and keep in touch, which has driven all of my future jobs thereafter. But that initial job, I had to make sure someone would go out on a limb for me. And that required, a couple of days of volunteering in my case.
And maybe I just add, Romeo, mining people are good people that are very generous with their time. When you're young and starting out of the industry, it's sometimes awkward or challenging to put yourself in front of people or ask for things. but mining people are good and they're receptive. So put yourself out there. There's all kinds of mining conferences and events and whatnot where you can really go out, meet people, and just introduce yourselves. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do when you're starting out, but you're always going to get a good reception.
That makes sense. There's no shortage of events where you can meet people in mining for sure. Well, and this is a question that I'm sure will make you cringe a little bit because I'm basically asking you to brag about yourself just a little. But I'm curious, and I think people in the audience would be as well, of how you feel your qualifications, so beyond just resume, but your personal qualifications suit you to the role day to day of being CEO. Barry, I'll start with you because we were just chatting.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about any general management role, balance is the thing that comes to mind for me. So, if you're a functional expert in one area, your capacity to step into a general management role is not great if you're not willing to step into other areas of the business and understand those other areas of the business. You don't need to be a master technician in all of them, but you need to know enough to manage and to lead. So from my perspective, working through operational finance to a great degree, stepping through to the treasury and capital raising side of finance, spending a lot of time on the ground from a mine construction perspective. And I've also spent a considerable amount of time in corporate development and IR. So you get to see all sections of the business. Ideally, you get a chance to step across. I mean, John Paul mentioned it. He is a geologist, but has had time to step into finance. So somebody who's taken the time to move across the business, and you get rewarded for that.
Yeah, a lot of jack of all trades for sure in this industry. I've certainly seen it. JP, I'll throw it to you for how your qualifications suit you to the role.
Yeah, so I feel that my qualifications and the early experiences that I had is really aligned well with Chesapeake. So I'll get into the big spiel at the end, but we have a project like Metates, which is a large, low-grade gold deposit that has gold that requires a special technique for metallurgy in order to extract the metal. The first major project I worked on that was large was the Dumont intrusion, which is again a low-grade nickel deposit, large tonnage, 10 billion pounds in that case. And I had to work on the geometallurgy and understanding the metallurgy and how to get the nickel and recover it. So for Metates, again, it's a 19 million ounce gold deposit, and it's also a 500 million ounce silver deposit. On both sides, the accounts, they're largest on precious metals on both gold and silver. But it's understanding the recoveries and understanding, the deposit that's, will be key to this new role that I'm taking on. And in addition to that, we also made a discovery at Lucy, and it's a early greenfields exploration program. And on that case, it's all the work that I did at Beartooth. I worked as a consultant as well for a while, bringing projects from early discovery to PFS. And it's really that work and understanding how to put together a systematic exploration program to ensure the success of the actual campaigns. And so a lot of that is going to support me in the current role that I have at Chesapeake to be successful.
That tracks. And Brian, last chance to brag probably for the course of the webinar. But how do your qualifications suit you the role?
Well, in my humble opinion, a perfect CEO would have a MBA on a generalist side, but there's no such thing as that. To know a little bit about all aspects of the business is key to being a good CEO. When I started in this business, I never thought that marketing a gold company would be as important as it is. I thought marketing was for selling toothpaste and running shoes and sweatshirts. So being open, and I think I told you this, Barry, when I hired you many years ago. The only silly question you could ask is one that you don't ask and you keep to yourself. So be open, ask questions. That's how you learn. And and become a mentor to the organization. And I've got great experience with senior companies, with junior companies. I've been involved in juniors who've done an IPO. So I can see where this can grow to. and I understand how to do things properly, and that's key, especially in today's world. And you know, we just need to stay, focused, and the biggest thing is to build a strong team below you. I believe in hiring people that are smarter than me, that someday will take over my role. That's a healthy environment, and you have to empower people to make the decisions and obviously hold them accountable as well.
Good for you. Now, here's one. Even in my comparably short time in the industry, I've noticed that when CEOs change, there can be either a big difference in management style or a relatively small difference. And I'm familiar with some of the CEOs that you guys are stepping into the shoes of. I'd love to know, again, starting with Brian, is there any change in focus or direction with you as CEO of the company? What can investors expect to stay the same versus expect to change?
Well, our long-term business plan is the same. We have 2 deposits in northwestern Quebec. One is Fenelon, which we recently completed a PEA on. The second one is Martiniere, and we have 830 square kilometers of prospective land. So we need to continue to explore. We need to continue to look for new discoveries. At the same time, we need to advance Martiniere. We're fully funded for next year. We raised $10 million of flow through last month, and that will give us about 26 to $27 million in the bank at the end of the year. And we're planning about a $20 million program next year, including all of our overheads. So we're funded for next year. We're going to focus on drilling. We're going to focus on advancing Martiniere with a goal of, at the appropriate time in the future, completing a PEA, and then combining the 2 PEAs, because the 2 deposits are 30 kilometers apart. There are synergies between them. And, at that point in time, we'll be in a better position to decide, to go to a pre-feas study or the next step, knowing more about what we have.
No, appreciate that. And JP, what can investors expect to stay the same versus be different with you replacing Alan?
Yeah, so I think on the outside it's going to look like there might be some changes, but really the plan is the same as what we had put together. So I had a strategy session with Alan and our board back in the summer, and we put together a plan for the company, and we're really moving towards the same plan. I was the one that helped develop the plan with Alan. We all came to an agreement that was a good plan to move the company forward. What may look different to our investors and our audience is you'll start seeing more news out about Lucy, right? Lucy was that initial discovery that we did just near the end of Alan's term. And we discovered, for example, one hole from surface, 24 meters of 6 grams gold right at surface. And we have several holes over 500 meters. Averaging, let's say, about 4 grams of gold right from surface on all holes. So it's going to look to the market that my focus is switching towards Lucy, but the truth is there's still work happening at the lab at Metates. We're still running the columns. We're still doing the work in the background with our alkaline solutions to extract the gold and to show a different pathway forward for Metates. But it takes time, right? Lab work takes time. Going out in the field and doing exploration does not take as much time. And so I'm able to put out more results and more information on that on the near term. But overall, the strategy remains the same.
Great. And finally, Barry, what change in focus or direction can people expect? What's different? What'll stay the same for investors?
Sure. So, I'm a firm believer, first of all, that you don't fix things that aren't broken. And there are certain areas of our business that are just running very well. And I'll speak for Denny, who I've stepped into the role after. From a community relations perspective, he was fantastic. He knew the region in Michigan. He knew the people. He built strong stakeholder relations. So it's really my role just to make sure we carry on with that and just continue to build really what I consider our license to operate. One of the focuses I am going to take a look at, though, is making sure that our story is better known in the market. We have the Copperwood asset in Michigan. It's been around for some time, like many assets. And so sometimes those types of assets can be a little overlooked. But when times change, you need to get the new story out. And I would say that Michigan itself, I think, will emerge as a strong mining state in the US. Obviously, when people think about the US, they go directly to states like Arizona and Nevada. But Michigan is permitting projects at the moment and also considering putting funding in. So it's going to be a great place to operate. Copper has just become a critical metal in the US, and we've only just recently completed all of our studies and overall permitting process. So it's kind of a right place at the right time scenario. We need to continue to improve our project, work on technical optimizations to make it better at current copper prices. But I think we're really in a really strong position to market the company, move towards development and into production, and really assist the US in critical copper supply, which it certainly needs.
Oh, great. Before I get into our next question, there are a couple questions from the audience I think now might be a decent time to address. So Kevin and MLB both ask similar sort of questions. They want to talk about the interim description in titles, and basically how it affects how you're perceived in the role and what you think the impact might be on raising capital, if there are any limitations or benefits to being an interim CEO versus dropping that part of the honorific. So I'll throw it just straight back from the beginning at Brian, if that's all right.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. And the interim role is when Mars retired, the board had to start a process to fulfill the corporate governance obligations. For all intents and purposes, I believe that I would become the permanent CEO at the appropriate time in the future. But they have to go through their process, and I think that's clearly understood in the marketplace. At least I've talked to it many times. Does it impact your access to capital? Well, we did a flow-through financing just after the change and closed it 2 weeks after the change. So it doesn't change our access to capital. We're a team. It's just one member of the team has changed. And we will continue to work through this going forward.
I appreciate that. And JP, just your thoughts on existing as an interim CEO.
Yeah. So I'm no concerned about the interim title. I worked at BMO Capital Markets for several years, about 4 years. I worked closely with the equity research team there, and I saw many companies we covered go through the role of the transition of the CEO, and most cases the interim CEO becomes the CEO. And I've always noticed that the ones that are most successful are the ones that behave like they will be the CEO at the end of the day. And they continue to move the agenda forward of the company. And as the company advances, the company tends to do well because there's stability that's provided by this individual in the interim role. And that's my plan in that role. After working at BMO, I did work at Hudbay for 5.5 years in corporate development there. I have strong relationships with several of the investment banks. They know me on a first name basis. They know what I'm capable of, and they've seen what I've been capable of at Hudbay. And there's a lot of trust and respect that has been built with my colleagues. And so concerns about being able to raise money and get the market behind you, I'm less concerned about for my case. And just for everyone here, Chesapeake does have $22 million in the bank, so it also gives me a good buffer to continue to do the work that needs to be done in the interim basis. So we're good to go on that side.
And finally, Barry, same topic.
Yeah, listen, to some degree, I choose to look past the interim word. I think it's important that we're all in a similar boat, that we step into our roles with energy, enthusiasm, and confidence. And if you bring that to the role and broadly work on the assumption you're going to carry on through, I think the investors and people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis will simply see you that way.
Oh, awesome. No, thanks. I appreciate you guys letting me throw a curveball from the audience. But jumping back into questions, Here's one, just curious, what you feel like the biggest challenge facing a company is right now that your team has to overcome to see a big material change in value. So just what you think the biggest challenge to overcome in the near and medium term is. And Barry, I'll shoot it to you because I still got you.
Yeah, certainly financing is the biggest challenge. Junior developers and explorers aren't in vogue right now. The global economy is somewhat challenged, and in times like that, money turns to blue chip investments and cash flowers. So yeah, we're not the port of first call for money coming in right now, but the tides change. Copper in particular will see its cycle, we believe, in the near term, and it actually creates a really nice opportunity, I think, for us as CEOs, coming in with companies that are, in commodities that we believe, well, for gold, I can speak, is quite strong already, and will only get better. But our valuations are relatively low, so there's certainly a marketing opportunity there. Asset values have to come back stronger. Mining is cyclical, and I think we'll see the benefit of that. So yeah, I mean, I'm similar to JP in that we have a good amount of cash in the bank at the moment, and that's a nice place to be during challenging times. But certainly, I look forward to the opportunity to raise the asset value and share value of the company.
That makes sense. Certainly better in the bank than not with this market. Makes sense. But JP, what do you think is the biggest challenge Chesapeake has to overcome to really deliver material value?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that we've been working on a lot is getting the message out about our technology. I think that's something that the market has a difficulty understanding. Usually when I meet with investors, the question is, oh, when is it going to work? When if you actually look at the results that we published in September, it's actually showing that we're able to oxidize the sulfides. And through that oxidation, we're basically creating an oxide mineralization, right? And then across our industry, gold in oxide form, it's an easy process. You just heap leach it, right? You Merrill-Crowe, and then you refine it to make gold. So all we're doing is adding an additional step to the process, and everything else is the same. And I think that's the biggest challenge we have is getting the market and getting investors to understand what that step is. And we've already started finding other examples of how to market it and how to show it to investors by, showing them the different forms of pyrite, showing them the different forms of how it's oxidizing when you actually look at it. Both in the column, you can see the rocks going from gray to brick red, right? And if you know anything about iron oxidizing, if you have iron, and when it rusts, it turns orange and then turns red and it breaks. And we're seeing that both in the column, but we're also seeing that when we actually take a microscope and have a look at it, and we can see the actual chemicals breaking down the iron sulfides that have the gold in it. And so we're taking a more active approach of trying to teach the audience and our investors what is actually happening and how it's working. And I think if we continue to do that, people will come around to what we already know, is that our process does work.
Oh, thank you. And to wrap up for this line of questioning, just Brian, what would you say is the biggest challenge facing Wallbridge right now?
Biggest challenge for Wallbridge right now is, we're fully financed for next year. Just a bit of a preamble. We're scheduled to close the year with $27 million in the bank. The joy of exploring in northern Quebec is the Quebec refundable tax regime. 37 cents on each dollar spent, not funded by Quebec flow through. We get a cash refund when our tax returns are audited when filed. And so this year we received $13.5 million based on last year's spending. And next year we should receive somewhere around $8 million based on our plans for this year. So, there's great incentives to explore in northwestern Quebec. But, our biggest challenge is our valuation. How we must overcome that is we need to stay focused. We need to focus on our district exploration play, looking for new targets, advancing Martinier with the goal of, at the appropriate time in the future, doing a combined PEA, and I believe we can unlock value. At the same time, spending more time marketing, spending more time with interviews like this, retail conferences, because we need to really ensure our shareholders understand where we're going, whether they're retail, institutional, or others, and take it from there. But I'm very excited about our future, and I look forward to being part of this for a very long time.
Awesome. And I do see, just to speak to the audience for a second, I do see a number of questions that are in there. I'm just going to ask everybody one company-specific question, and then we'll get to those broader questions you guys have asked. Do appreciate them. Keep them coming. We'll try to get to as many as we can today. But into some specific company questions. I'll start with Barry. Most recent press release demonstrated good progress with the pre-construction activities at Copperwood. Can you give us an update on what is happening on site right now, and really how you communicate with stakeholders? I know you've got a number of them on the ground in Michigan, and what you do to ensure that you've got that ongoing license to operate.
Yeah, thanks, Romeo. And I think, first of all, I'd point out it's acknowledging we haven't made a full construction decision. It's just nice to have broken ground. We did have some permit obligations that required us to do all of our wetland impacts and environmental mitigations, but it allowed us to really get a start on site, do some meaningful mass excavation, test out some local contractors, and really show the region and show the state of Michigan that we're willing to put capital in. And nicely, you're putting a bit of that initial capital behind you, and naturally makes your construction decision a little bit easier. It's also provided us an opportunity to show that we want to be a sustainable developer and producer. One of the key things when you impact any wetland in the state of Michigan is that you need to equally, or to a greater extent, conserve wetland. The area that we operate in Michigan is a beautiful area, and we certainly intend on keeping it that way. And the way that we build license to operate is just through continual communication. That's with local stakeholder groups, that's the townships, the counties, all those in the region. It's dealing with the state authorities at all levels, but particularly environmental compliance levels, dealing with local businesses. It's being in the region, it's hosting and having meetings with the people on the ground, it's hiring locals so you're amongst the group. And really it's that gives you your license to operate. Having permits is all well and good, and I'll acknowledge we're fortunate enough to be fully permitted in the state of Michigan, but that's only one element of license to operate. It's really your broad acceptance in the region across all stakeholders that allows you to effectively operate on the ground.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. JP, I know you already touched on it in your last answer, but this is a question we get sometimes from your audience. We'll see it on the board sometimes. But when can we expect further updates on the metallurgical testing, and are we making clear progress on that front?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I'm actually in Vancouver this week visiting our lab. So it's spending days in the lab, looking at the actual technology working is really important. Spending time with the technicians and the team. Our QP even came up to visit, to be here during these past few days. And the work that was done, that we press released back in September, continues to move forward. So we were able to find a set of solutions and a certain set of parameters where we're getting 50% faster rates on the oxidation. The column is still on, those columns, and they're still working through to get to 180 days. On the back of that, earlier last month, in October, we actually put another set of columns on using the same parameters, and we're looking to run that out to 60 days and 120 days. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because when you have oxidation to 60 days, 120 days, and then 180 days, and we flip them over into the leach cycle to actually see how much gold we recover, we'll get an understanding of how many days we have to oxidate for how much gold we will recover, right? So we can get an understanding of how long it'll actually take and what's the optimum point when you're looking at costs and time to discover exactly when and how long we should be oxidizing the material to get the optimal recovery. And so that work is ongoing right now. I'm hoping to have that out in the first half of next year, and that will be the basis of the continued work. Also in the lab, we are continuing to test other conditions. The lab is constantly trying to find faster solutions to oxidize our material faster. So, it's an iterative process. And every time I get better results, I look forward to release that to the market and share it with everyone. But, it requires time. And so.
No, appreciate that for sure. One question for Brian. Now, in looking at all your boards and the chatter, it's clear that you guys have a fairly active retail base. And curious, really, my question to you is what your plan is to shift or change the sentiment among that base as you progress at Wallbridge.
Yes, there's no doubt we have an active retail following. A little better than 50% of our shareholders are, either small unidentified institutions or retail shareholders. What do we need to do is, one, we need to spend more time marketing to our retail shareholders, and today is a good start to that, and we'll continue with that going forward. We're identifying next year various retail conferences as well as the normal industry conferences. We need to set clear targets, deliver on our targets, and see where we get to as we advance both Fenelon and Martiniere. Fenelon, we completed a PEA, so we've got an indication of the size of the prize there. We need to determine that for Martiniere as well, put them together so we can look at the two projects combined and see if we can improve the economics. And then at the same time, spending, a portion of our exploration budget looking for new discoveries and new targets, because this is very prospective land in northwestern Quebec. Our investment thesis is that we're about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive north of Noranda. The Noranda Val-d'Or belt, the outcrop is exposed, and millions and millions of ounces have been mined over the years. We believe that there's the same structure to the north, although it's covered with glacial overburden, which makes it a little bit more challenging to find out the right places to drill. But we're on strike to the Detour mine, which is on the Ontario side of the border. So we think we got a great postage stamp. We need to continue to advance the projects, but we need to deliver.
Probably good advice for anyone. Now, I will give all three of you an opportunity to just pitch the security before we wrap, but I did want to get to some of these audience questions first. Some of them are pretty pointed, so I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to tackle them. There's one from Robert for Brian. He wants to know your thoughts on why your share price is being suppressed along with many other juniors.
Well, right now, the status of the junior market is there's a lack of institutional investing in the marketplace. So, a lot of the shares are driven by, retail shareholders, maybe some panic selling or stuff like that. And, it is a tough market. It's a great gold price. I remember, I was in this business when gold was at $250 in the mid 90s, and this market seems tougher than it was back then. Primarily because when gold was $250, oil was $10 a barrel, and today it's $70, $80, $90 a barrel. So we need to weather this storm. We need to focus on a reasonable budget to advance the project, to go to the next step and do a feasibility study on Fenelon. The dilution that would be required to finance that would be stressful for us and all of our shareholders. So that's why we did a flow-through financing to put together the money combined with our estimated year-end cash balances to do a decent program next year to focus on how we can improve what we own today. But yeah, it is a challenging market, and we will get through it. And there are better times ahead. I've seen this before, and we'll see it again. But we have to stay focused and manage based on our cash resources at the time.
Well, thank you. One, again, pretty precise question for Barry. And this might take some of the thunder out of your last wrap up, but they're just curious if Highland is large tonnage copper or high grade. That'll give you an opportunity to answer.
Copperwood is in the kind of 1.5% grade, which is actually relatively high grade, although acknowledging it's an underground mine. It's 6,600 ton per day, so I'd say mid tonnage. It's a good mid-sized mine with grade to support certainly current copper prices and extreme leverage to copper price from here.
Great, thanks. This question, I'll pose it to everyone because it's timely, but I'll shoot it first to you, JP. SS Crete from the audience wants to know if anyone's aware of the new changes in tax incentives for flow through. He notes a concern for financing for gold projects, specifically in the near term. Says that critical minerals seem to be okay with that 30% tax credit. Just curious on your perspective.
Yeah, is that the one that's for projects in Canada? I
believe that's what he's referring to, yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm not the best person to answer that since all our projects are in Mexico. I did work with someone else that did look at that previously, and it is exciting. You have to make sure that the projects that you're putting this funding to are green fields, and they're looking at something new. Even in my previous role at my previous company, it was an operator, so a bit more challenging. Most of the exploration that's done at operators are brownfield exploration around projects. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity for any of the explorers that are looking in Canada. It's a great incentive that the government has put forth to get us spending more money in our country. But unfortunately, on the Chesapeake side, I can't really tap into that because it's not applicable to Mexico.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I'll throw it to you actually, Brian. If you're aware of the changes and how you feel it'll impact financing for gold projects in the near term.
Well, flow through is designed for grassroots exploration. It has to be Canadian exploration expenditures to qualify to be renounced to the shareholders. You subscribe for the shares, you get a premium, so you manage dilution, and then you have 12 months to spend that money, and you renounce effective December 31st of the year that you finance. Like we completed finance recently, we'll renounce to the subscribers December 31st, and we have till December 31st the following year to spend that money on qualified exploration. I think the proposed tax change that is being mentioned here is the federal government's looking at in their last budget, they proposed some changes to the alternative minimum tax that for ultra high net worth individuals, it impacted the deductibility of some of these charity flow through investments. And it could grind the premiums going forward, but you will still receive premiums. The legislation hasn't been enacted yet. I know there's a movement out there to provide comments and feedback to the Minister of Finance, and I support those initiatives because it's key. But it's impacting the ultra high net worth individuals that get involved in like the Quebec charity flow through, and it could impact the deductibility, and it could grind the premiums, but the story is still unfolding, and let's stay tuned.
That makes sense. I got one question. This is, I'll pose it to everyone. It's kind of an interesting question. Feel free to take it in whatever direction you'd like. It's kind of a tricky question too. This is from James in the audience. He asked if you have any experience dealing with resistance from environmental activist groups, and just wants to know about what the relationship is like with those groups and what strategies are most effective in pushing through. I can shoot it to you, Barry, first.
I think most mining companies deal with elements of opposition, and we have, I'd say, modest pockets of it. I think they need to be taken very seriously and listened to. If they're constructive groups, I think they can be communicated to with directly. If they're not overly constructive and if they're delivering mistruths about your project, I think the best way to deal with is just putting the actual truths out in the market through your communication channels, making sure people understand your overall license to operate, how you intend on operating from an environmental and sustainability perspective, the scale of your project, the economic impact of your project, and really all elements from beginning to end. And you think you need to be clear and concise and repetitive with your messaging. And if you're right, then market participants will listen to your story more so than the opposition. But as I say, to be taken very seriously and to be communicated with appropriately.
Oh, thanks. Shoot at JP, same angle of the question. What's your perspective on working with or dealing with, depending on your perspective, environmental activist groups in your projects?
Yes. So for our sake, we have one local community, one ejido, that we've been working with for decades. We have a great relationship with this ejido. They've been involved in the process, from beginning to where we are currently today. We have regular meetings with the group. We ensure that they know what we're doing in the field. They know what we're planning to do. Anytime we send crews out to do baseline environmental work or do work on the project, they're well aware of anytime those sort of activities are happening. I think it's most important, and what I've learned in roles previous to this, is having that relationship with the community first. They're the ones that are the most impacted by the actual project. They're the ones that are going to be the most benefited from the project, and having that relationship. And I've seen it in other companies I've worked with. When you have a strong relationship with the community, then all the stuff that's happening on the outside, it's not as important, in the sense that the community, if they're on your side and they're working with you, then they'll say no to those other groups that are coming in. And it's the community relationships and the relationships with not only the leaders of the community, but also the individual groups within the community. That's where you can create a strong foundation that will prevent yourself from being impacted by third-party groups with their own interests.
Thanks. Brian, just before we jump in the next question, same topic to you. In the past or currently, how do you work with or deal with environmental activists in your projects?
In our business, we've always had to deal with environmental activists. The key to success is communication. We have 3 First Nations partners in northwestern Quebec. Ever since we started this adventure, we've had monthly meetings with them. We've signed a pre-development agreement with 2 of the 3. We try to hire as many First Nations contractors and employees. About 25 to 30% of our workforce is from the First Nations communities. We buy locally. Of our 2022 expenditures, about half of it came from, when I say locally, northwestern Quebec suppliers and contractors. And the key is communication. And then going forward, as you develop this project, the key is to have a project which has the lowest possible carbon footprint humanly possible as you advance the project. And the biggest asset we have isn't even on our balance sheet. We're about 20 kilometers away from the James Bay power grid, which provides, hydroelectric power to Quebec and ultimately to parts of New York State as well. So we've already signed up. We're, dealing with the process of getting approval to tap into it at the right period of time. And with that, we need to focus on electrifying as much as possible to manage the carbon footprint. So, you need to focus to minimize the carbon footprint. You need to focus on relationships, communications, and planning to take advantage of, what tools are in your toolbox.
Well, thanks, Brian. While I've got you, question from the chat from Matt Ivanov. I want to know if you can expand on the expansion potential of the Tabasco zone.
expand on the expansion. It's there. We need to continue to drill it. It's open at depth and in all directions. We do have one drill hole that goes well below the bottom of the the PEA resource model, and we believe we will continue to extend it. But right now we're looking on extensions to Fenelon as part of next year's plan to hopefully expand the resource that way, and then more focus on Martiniere to catch it up to where Fenelon is today.
Appreciate that very much. I saw there are a couple questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get to them, so I do want to give everybody an opportunity to talk about their stock broadly. But for the couple that we didn't get to, we will make sure that the relevant executive gets in touch with you as soon as possible. Just sometimes run out of time. And for anybody else, if you think of the perfect question seconds after this event ends, please do send it in. We'll make sure the appropriate person gets in touch with you as soon as possible. Thank you, gentlemen, for a great conversation. I do want to give you an opportunity just to explain why now might be the right time for investors to get involved. So I'll start with you, Barry. Why is now a good time for investors to take a look at Highland?
Yeah, listen, Highland Copper has all of the fundamental building blocks to become a developer and producer. And while we're sitting in a very modest valuation, I think it's the right time in advance. Also, the copper price moving aligned to the fundamentals. But those building blocks are critical. We operate in the US and Michigan. I think Michigan will emerge as a fantastic mining state. The US has a need for critical supply of domestic copper, amongst other metals. So I think we're in the right place at the right time. Permits are one of your main building blocks. We are one of, I would say, very few, you could arguably count them on one hand, permitted copper projects in the US in Copperwood. You need scale of resource. Both of our assets have multi-billion pound resources and reserves leading to long-lived assets. And underpinning all of this, you need strong shareholders, which we have, and they've supported us financially through this past period. We have a strong balance sheet, plenty of cash. We're sitting with about 25 million US right now to keep ourselves moving forward proactively, no debt, and no warrants. So you really need all of those things. You need everything lined up to move yourself into a project finance. I think we're going to do very well over the coming period, and I do think we're a good opportunity for investors.
Thank you. JP, I'll shoot it to you to pitch the audience on Chesapeake.
Yeah, so Chesapeake really is a three-part story. We have the discovery at Lucy. That's high-grade gold that we've discovered from surface, over 500 meters. Again, some intersections include 6 grams of over 24 meters. It's a really exciting program that we're going to continue to explore and develop and figure out both how big the deposit is and how meaningful it will be to the market. On Metates, it's a reinvented story. In the past, it was viewed as a story that would go through POX treatment of the ores in order to get the access to the gold. With our technology, which is the third part of our story, we're able to access the gold from the sulfide ores in a heap leach environment rather than in a tank under great heat and pressure. And what that means to the market also is on environmental side, if you're running everything in heap leaches are a lot less intensive on the water side and on the power side, and also the CO2 emissions. It showed to be at least a tenth of what you would be required to run a POX, a tenth of what you're required to for water, for power, and CO2 emissions. So it's more environmentally friendly, doesn't require a tailings facility, which has its own challenges. And it is also cheaper, right? POX plants and flotation and all of that are billion-dollar projects. And we have a project that is not only a capital efficient, but also economic. And we're looking to continue to advance that project to PFS over the coming months. And we're supported by 22 million in the bank, and we have supportive shareholders in Eric Sprott and Sun Valley, as well as we have insiders, and together it's about 40% of our shares are covered by management and the board and those two investors. So we're well positioned to continue advancing the Chesapeake story.
Thanks, JP. And to close us off before we cut to thank yous, Brian, eager to hear your perspective on why investors should consider Wallbridge right now.
Well, right now, we believe our stock is significantly undervalued. If you look at the results of the Fenelon PEA, and again, that was only on Fenelon, so it's only part of this property we have. It indicates that the company, the asset is worth more than the current trading value. So our goal over the next 12 to 24 months is to unlock this value. We financed for next year. We believe we've got a reasonable program put together with these investment tax credits. Money should come in at the end of next year, which will allow us to start 2025 as we figure things out. So there's no imminent financing risk, and we need to deliver on our plans. We have great supportive shareholders. Agnico owns 9.9% of us. Eric owns about 16%, and a small contracting company out of Sudbury that goes back to when Wallbridge was a base metal explorer in the Sudbury Basin, owns about 6% of the company. So we have good, solid, long-term shareholders. And Agnico has participated in all the financings, since they acquired Kirkland Lake, because Kirkland Lake originally made this investment to maintain their ownership interest at 9.9%. So, clearly there's support coming from that side as well. We think it's a great opportunity to invest in the company, and, we are looking for better days ahead.
Thank you, Brian, JP, Barry. Thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate the conversation. To everybody in the audience, thanks for asking questions. Again, if we didn't get to, we'll make sure we get to them soon. And most importantly, for all the Americans in the audience, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoy a weekend of turkey and family. And everybody else, have a wonderful afternoon.